I've been collecting video games for over 13 years, and I've developed a pretty sizable collection in that sort of time. And one of the things that I've been doing internally is crossing off of certain checklists of conditions that the item has to be in order for it to be on the shelf. I don't just buy everything that I see, and I make sure that I spend my money wisely. And as such, because of that internal condition list, it gets harder for people to actually buy games for me. I didn't really consider what my condition was until I posted a video of me peeling the film off of the Sega Master System that I got. I posted it on Reddit. It got 1,500 points on Reddit. On Twitter, it got 6,000 likes, and even Kotaku wrote an article about it, and the internet was pretty split on whether or not they agreed with me peeling the film off. Some people thought it was very satisfying, and other people questioned my sanity, and a small number of people suggested that I get a manicure. And for the most part, I think those comments were in jest, but it really made me consider why I peeled the film off of that Master System. I mean, that's a 30-year-old film. It's been on there since the system left the factory, and it didn't get peeled off until now. And I had considered peeling it off beforehand. I'm not one to just rip things off and do it. I actually considered it, but one of the reasons why I peeled it off in the first place was because there was a piece of Scotch tape right through the middle of it. And I saw that and I was like, well, I can peel it off the tape. But as I started to peel it off, I noticed that there was a film on top of it. So I decided to peel the film off. And, before I did that, I took my camera off and I peeled it. And so I went back to consider exactly why I peeled it off. And it's mainly because I want my systems and games to be in the best condition that they can possibly be without really modifying them too much. And I figure I'd go over a video as a collector of what I look for when putting games in my collection. So first off, complete in box. Does it really matter to me? Well, it kind of depends on the system. Nintendo games, I don't really care if they're loose or not. I actually prefer them loose because I have a whole slide of them up there and it all looks uniform and I really like the way that it looks. I'm not really too interested in collecting complete in box unless I come across some that all cost as much as the loose copies. I have some complete in box games behind me that I acquired for really cheap. A lot of them I got from my landlord. I found a box of video games down in his basement and I offered him $50 for them. I don't really go out of my way to collect boxes specifically for Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, and NES, mainly because I like to play the games, and when you open up the boxes repeatedly, then it starts to ruin the box, and then you kind of consider well, do I really want the box on my shelf if it looks all beat up? Now, the Genesis has to be complete in box because they came originally in those clamshells. If the game originally came in the cardboard like Ultimate Mortal Kombat or Sonic & Knuckles, I'm not too hard-pressed to find those. But one of the reasons why I go complete in box for Genesis is because the carts don't actually match. Super Nintendo, they're all the same cart. NES, all the same cart. Nintendo 64, all the same cart. So if they're loose, I can, put them uniformly on my shelf. But for Genesis, you got, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, and then you have Madden 95. I mean, they're not even the same size, and they got this yellow thing on here, and even the label doesn't really match up too much. I mean, it doesn't look uniform on my shelf, especially for disc games. I have to have the box for the disc games. There's really no exception. Even a cardboard box like the Night Trap for the Sega Saturn, I gotta have it in the box because, I mean, that's part of the artwork and that's really important to me. I mean, I don't really care too much if the CD case has been replaced, because I used to work for a game store. People play games in Chicago. It's now shut down, unfortunately. But what they used to do is if the case was beat up, you can kind of see there's a crack in this case, they would just replace the case because the case is kind of all scuffed up, and they would make it into brand new case. And I really don't mind that they replaced the case, because honestly, if I gave you two games, one had the original Sony case and the other one had a new one from another manufacturer, you would be hard pressed to tell the difference. And speaking of replacement cases, I can't wait until Limited Run Games comes out with replacement Sega Saturn cases, because I mean, this crack here on the hinges, they're very brittle as they age. Some people, when they collect for Sega Saturn, they stack them up on top of each other, which is incredibly damaging, because even though it's not, one case isn't too heavy, but when you start to stack them up, like, the stress on there eventually causes this plastic to break. And as time goes on, it's getting harder and harder to find actual good looking cases. I mean, this one I think is actually yellowing too. The plastic is yellowing and it doesn't look like it's brand new. And I'm totally comfortable with buying replacement cases. But one thing that I'm not actually on board with is reproduction anything. I don't buy any reproduction anything. I don't buy reproduction labels. I don't buy, reproduction cartridges or anything like that. I think that it kind of detracts from the actual collecting aspect of it. I don't really mind too much if people buy reproductions, but at the same time, if you're gonna spend $25 to $35 on one reproduction, you're just better off buying a reproduction flash cart and playing those games on the original hardware that way. Now, I do collect some homebrew carts, but as long as they're clear and translucent, like this retro USB Christmas edition that came out last year, it has an LCD screen on it. I mean, you can totally tell that this isn't an official cart. I mean, that's really what it is, and that's really what matters. I mean, if you're gonna buy a repro or something like that, get it in a translucent green or blue or something that makes it totally outrageously fake. As far as consoles go, I don't really care that it comes in the box. I mean, basically it depends on the price, of course. If it comes in complete in box, like I got the Sega Scope 3D system, the Master System, complete in the box. It came with the two controllers, the phaser, it came with the system, it came with Missile Command 3D built in, and it came complete in the box. Now, I really don't care that it comes in the box, but it was only $100, and if I were to buy the system loose, I would be paying much more than that. I mean, and the box is water damaged. There's like this brown film all over it. I really wish that I could clean it. If you know how to clean those boxes, please leave me a comment down below. I would really like to try it out. But I mean, if the system doesn't complete in the box, I mean, as long as it's not like outrageously expensive, like, I'll go for it. Like this Commodore 64. I bought the Commodore 64 because, I mean, it's a really interesting system, and around my area, they go for about $150 to $200, and that was really expensive for me to buy a system that I don't really have nostalgia for, and I found this for $50, and while it's not in the most pristine condition, it's got like some burn marks or something like that on a little bit of the system, but you can't really tell from this angle. I'll put some B-roll on there so you can see what I'm talking about, but if I were to show you this system, you're like, wow, that's a really nice looking system. And that's really what I look for. If the condition of the system isn't like 100% pristine, like for instance, I bought this Legend of Zelda 3DS. It's a really nice 3DS system, but it has like a little bit of scratches on the screen. It's clearly been used, and for that I don't really care if like it had some cracks or the stylus was missing or the screen was punctured or something like that. I probably wouldn't complete it into my collection unless it was being sold as parts for like $20 or something like that. I'm not really in the market to buy broken consoles, especially if they're close to the original retail price. I did make an exception for a Vectrex, which I found for $80. Now, this thing probably needs to be recapped, and it needs a little bit of love, and it's going to be definitely a project down the road that I actually want to go, but I really wanted a Vectrex, and for $80 for one that kind of turns on and then turns off, probably needs to be recapped. I decided to take that gamble. And another thing that I consider when adding stuff into my collection is whether or not it's sealed. And I do have a couple of sealed games in my collection, but most of them are brand new, like my games from Limited Run Games. They come sealed. I don't really have a lot of time to play them, but when I see a good price, I make sure that I snag them. And so they stay sealed on my shelf until I'm ready to play them. But there are 3 games that I will keep sealed forever, and those games are Devil's Third for the Wii U, Shaq Fu for the Sega Genesis with a free wrap CD, E.T. for the Atari 2600. Now, these games are notoriously bad, and I don't really have a desire to play them, but also if I want to play them, I can probably find them loose and significantly cheaper than their newer alternatives. I actually have a copy of E.T. loose sitting downstairs, and that one I picked up for $5 at a flea market. And same thing with Shaq Fu. Shaq Fu is probably pretty easy to track down if I really want to play it. And last condition that I consider is historical significance. Now, I have a handful of games that are regarded as terrible games, like the Shaq Fu and E.T. Both of those are staples of video game history, and those I had to have in my collection. I even have a complete in box Superman for the Nintendo 64. Terrible game, but it's in my collection because of the notoriety of it. I even have the Zeldas for the CDIs. I don't have Zelda's Adventure because that one is ungodly expensive, but I do have the Faces of Evil and the Wand of Gamelon. Again, I don't have an interest in playing them, but as a collector, I want those in my collection because of the notoriety. And another thing to consider too is the artwork on these games. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a really good game for it to be added into my collection. I have a couple of duds in my collection, and it kind of makes my collection a lot more homely and colorful and stuff. I think that if I had a collection of only the best games, it would feel very unoriginal and uninspired. And that's kind of why I like having my collection. You know, I have a Power Glove. It's so bad, but it's a part of history. It's a part of, it looks really cool, and it's something to accentuate my collection. The same thing with the Panasonic Cube. It's a silver GameCube that plays DVDs, and I have a Rob, and I have a Virtual Boy, and all these things that I like adding to my collection, so that way it is a collection that I curate. And I would love to hear what you have to say on how you collect, and leave me a comment down below. I'd really like to read these. I really want to get some more of these conversation videos going, so if you like this video, give it a like, and if you're new here, consider subscribing for future content. I'm Super Nicktendo, and thanks for watching.